straightforward. I'd like you to leave this discussion thinking more critically about the software cost estimates you produce or that you consume. I plan to accomplish this by addressing size growth, though I recognize there are various sizing techniques in use today. I'm going to tell the growth story in terms of source lines of code for 3 reasons. A, my professional software estimating experience is weapon systems oriented, and as you'll see in a slide later in the presentation, source lines of code still dominates that domain in the US. Second, there's a body of research from which to draw that I'm going to discuss today. And then third, I really believe, the concepts that I'm going to share with you today can logically be extended to function points or other sizing techniques. So I would ask that you keep an open mind about what I'm going to say, although I'm going to be discussing things in terms of source lines of code. A couple other things here before I get going for context. I think it's important for you to know that my perspective regarding cost estimating has been shaped by 40 years of work with the ultimate objective of helping the government do a better job of budgeting for complex programs. Since all too often, these complex programs are broken on day one due to unrealistic budgets. More times than not, I've found myself in the position of telling senior decision makers that they don't have enough money to accomplish their project. This bad news is typically not well received, but defensible analysis can go a long way to easing their pain. Final note here is that, Eric mentioned that I'm the former CEO and now technical director of Technomics. Technomics is a company that is about 150 strong, and our core expertise is doing cost estimating and cost analysis. All right, so it's more generally, it's not just a focus on software, it's a holistic focus on total programs. For example, a new submarine or a new aircraft or a new radar system. Certainly software is an important component of those types of systems, but our view is a holistic one. So anyway, I think with that as an introduction, we'll move on. So the agenda I'm going to follow today is on the screen here. I need to do some important general stage setting before I get to the main course. So I'll take 4 slides to provide my perspective regarding cost estimating. This should provide you useful context for the rest of the presentation. The second and third agenda items address software growth. I'll discuss 4 studies that are actually available to you via the web. These works are all available at no cost, and in fact, 3 of them can be downloaded from the International Cost Estimating and Analysis Association's website. And in fact, Eric, I'm happy to, just send you copies of these, of the links or the documents themselves so you can share it with the audience. My hope here is, though I'm only going to give you a snippet of what these 4 studies have to say, that I'm hoping that it inspires you to explore some or all of these further. So, big picture. A credible, defensible cost estimate will not ensure the success of a complex project. And when I talk about complex projects, for example, I'm talking about the development of a new aircraft or a new ship or a new ground vehicle, but you can put it in your own context. So it's not going to ensure the success of those projects, but it can go a long way to facilitating success by establishing realistic expectations. As indicated in this slide, a good cost estimate should lead to a realistic budget that in turn supports an executable contract, i.e., a contract that is properly funded. Put differently, and as I mentioned, in my opening remarks, many projects are broken on day one simply because they're underfunded. This doesn't necessarily mean that the cost estimate was bad, but I've certainly witnessed programs that started at a disadvantage because the estimate had flaws. Either it didn't include important costs, or it didn't use the latest historical data that was available, and therefore led to some misestimation. More times than not, the problem is less related to flaws and more related to fiscal realities that constrain the estimate, but do not alter program advocates' expectations regarding the capability they desire. In other words, we know we can't afford what we want to acquire, but we still want to try. I'd be really surprised if there aren't a number of you in the audience who witness this frustrating reality. So to continue with a sort of a broad view here, based on my cost analysis experience, notwithstanding the reality to which I just alluded, we want and need decision makers and other consumers of our work to trust our analysis and resulting recommendations. Thus, the first requirement estimate is that it be credible and defensible. The principal means to establish this, as is shown on the screen. This concept of an evidentiary chain is extremely important. Clarity of an evidentiary chain. There's a need for a clear evidentiary chain. The need for a clear evidentiary chain is precisely why many old school US cost analysts, I guess that means old guys like me, don't use commercial cost estimating tools like Price, SEER, and the other things that are available. It's not to say that they don't serve their purpose and that there's not credibility to them, but the fact that I can't see exactly how the sausage is made, that is, for a given cost estimating relationship that's in the tool, what's the underlying data? How was it normalized? What quantitative techniques were used to produce the relationship? And what are the associated statistics that describe the validity, uncertainty, et cetera, associated with the relationship, means that I don't understand and can't explain the evidentiary chain to decision makers. It's possible that I haven't interacted enough with guys like Dan and guys like Tony DeMarco in recent years to find out that maybe there's greater transparency. And in fact, it's probably a little early for Dan to be on the phone right now, but he might be on the line. I certainly would be pleasantly surprised to learn that things have changed. Our work as analysts needs to be as persuasive and even compelling as possible. I would say, this point I made here at the bottom that, we got to be able to tell. We got to be able to give bad news, right? If we're going to tell someone that they need 50% more money than they budgeted for a project, we better be prepared to sell and defend our position. In fact, my strong opinion is if you're a cost analyst and you're doing your job right, you're giving bad news more than you're giving good news. And frankly, for me, that's the beauty of this field and why I've felt lucky to be working in it for 40 years. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a general or an admiral's office and said, hey, I know you want this bad, but you're not going to get it for this amount of money unless you decide what you can live without. And I think, this is an important takeaway for those of you who either do cost estimating full time or do it on a part-time basis. And it makes the message that I'm delivering today I think even more important. Okay. So you see Edward Deming, process improvement gurus, picture there in the top right. One of the last key decision makers in the Pentagon relative to acquiring new complex systems had this on his wall.
Rick, if I can, 1 second. Sometimes the sound's going down. I don't know if you can speak a little bit closer to the microphone, but this.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Eric, is that better?
I think you used it's a microphone in your computer probably that you are using.
All right, hang on a second. Let me see if I can turn up the volume here.
You're close to the computer, the sound is better.
Is that better? Is that better?
I think it will be okay, yes.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm sorry. I hope everyone didn't miss a lot of that. So in keeping with the theme here about, evidentiary chain, the fact is data is the foundation for estimate credibility and defensibility. And as a cost analyst, yes, we have a job to do in terms of generating an estimate, let's say a software estimate, but similar to, painting the outside of your house, if you're not doing the all-important prep work before you start painting, you're going to be your estimate is going to be at a disadvantage. So it's not just collecting data, it's making sure you understand what data you've got, normalizing that data properly, and the bumper sticker kind of says it all. So close to pivoting to the software growth stuff, but I think there's a couple other important points I want to make here. Believe it or not, cost estimating is not about being right. All right. Think about the following. When was the last time you walked into a market to buy groceries and walked out spending what you expected to spend? I'm guessing never. In fact, well, maybe a lot of you don't walk into a store having estimated what you think you're going to spend. But there's many possible reasons for this reality. For example, in my case, if I go into a store hungry, I'm destined to buy something that wasn't on my shopping list. So, estimating is rather about minimizing how wrong we are. We're never going to be right. It's about minimizing how wrong we are. And it's critical to present decision makers with a range of possible outcomes. And, I've shown an example of an S-curve here where you can go in and you can talk in terms that decision makers can understand, right? So there's X% probability that the cost of the program will be, in this case, there's 57% probability that the cost of the program will be $100 million or less. Well, I don't have $100 million. Well, then, we can talk about other points along this curve, and I can tell you what the probability is going to be that you're going to be able to get what you want for that amount of money. So my question is, can any of you relate to this conversation between the pointy hair boss and Dilbert? I'm guessing you can. You've seen my not so subtle cutting and pasting of size in there. You could put cost estimates in there if you wanted in that first box. But the fact is this, whether it be cost data or non-cost data, the best estimates are going to be derived from and grounded in information for completed or nearly completed projects. So a theme you're going to see here is you're doing sizing estimates. I mean, you may be the greatest function point estimator in the world. I would strongly urge you, and this sort of goes back to Eric's slide regarding capability maturity, to use what data you can get your hands on. And if it's not in a nice, neat database like the IceBegs database, dig for information, dig for information, dig for information, dig for information. All right. All right. So let's one more slide and then we'll pivot. As an estimator, I can't estimate what you can't describe for me. Parametric-based cost estimates have a number of advantages. One of those advantages is reliance on objective measures used to characterize the complexity of what's being estimated. For instance, speed for an aircraft, range for radars, endurance of an unmanned aerial vehicle, the quieting level for submarines, and last but not least, size for software. In the US, in recognition of cost estimators having as thorough an understanding as possible of the project being estimated, government project advocates are required to develop what's called a technical and programmatic baseline that outlines the salient features of the project for cost estimators' reference. In the case of software-intensive projects, this baseline includes a fair number of details, including but not limited to the size of the project to be estimated. So now we're going to talk about the first of the four studies that I identified up front. Recent General Accounting Office report, General Accountability Office report, Government Accountability Office report presents findings regarding the magnitude and reasons for the largest U.S. defense programs experiencing cost and schedule growth. Although the focus of this report is the totality of a given weapon system project, it presents questionnaire results for a subset of programs that GAO investigated in relation to the software development element of the program. The three slides that follow are just a subset of some of GAO's findings, and I should mention to you, if you've never had the opportunity to read a GAO report, and all of their work is on the web. They're very well written investigations that are actually initiated by Congress. This is kind of the watchdog investigative arm of Congress. So if a congressman decides that there's a U.S. government program that they want researched and want answers to hard questions, they turn to GAO to do that. All right, so this first figure addresses 8 specific software development risks that 26 of 42 programs that were sort of singled out for investigation on the software development side gave it these answers in their questionnaire. The colors depict the degree to which the factor contributed to software development risk. Now remember, we're talking about software development in the context of a much bigger program, all right? So in a lot of these programs, software development in dollar terms may not be significant, but in terms of delivering the capability that's required, it can be absolutely critical to the success of the program. So at one end of the spectrum, the white band represents the number of programs that cited a particular risk factor being a large contributor. At the other end of this, or close to the other end of the spectrum, the green band represents the number of programs for which a particular risk factor did not contribute to that program's risk. I added red check marks to highlight factors that are good examples of real world challenges that come into play when you talk about potential growth in software sizing. These things can range from the program being more complex than was envisioned to, there being undefined requirements that, come to light after the project has started. Second slide, the second figure that I want to share with you addresses 5 specific challenges associated with both government and contractor software development staff. Unlike the last figure, all 42 of the programs that have been selected for a special look on the software development side, all 42 of the programs surveyed considered one or more of these challenges relevant to their programs. And I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you that all 42 of these programs cited some form of staffing as being problematic. Again, you can see the key here as to what the color coding means, and the number of programs that responded and how they responded. Okay. The final, yes.
Is there something you can do about your mic, because it's going up and down still? Yeah, your volume of your audio. I don't know what, but it's difficult for people to stay focused. It's tiring too. So maybe you can think about something.
Well, let me try something else here. All right. What about now?
We know. Just try it. Just go on, Rick.
Hang on.
Something that's interfering with the mic levels. That's it.
Yeah. All right. What about now? Any better?
No, it's still the same.
I'm sorry. I can't.
Let's just continue, Rick. It is if you are close enough to the laptop, then most of the time it's okay. So let's not spend too much time on solving this. Let's just continue.
Okay. All right. Well, the third slide that I want to share here from GAO is a point I made earlier, that for DoD systems, they're principally custom developed software, and the fact is that in the case of custom developed software, you can be sure that there's a higher probability for growth. Okay. Now, very quickly, given where we are time-wise, this is the first of the three studies that I mentioned. There's a 2007 study that was done by some of my colleagues at Technomics. I'm not going to go through this picture. This is known as an influence diagram. You look at get a copy of the presentation, the full presentation to explain this, but the idea here is to discuss what are the potential influences that drive growth. And if you see a positive sign, that means there's a positive relationship between each end of the arrow, meaning if one end goes up, the other end goes up. If one end goes down, the other end goes down. So findings in this study are interesting, and I'm only presenting some of them, but in the interest of time here, I will say that what you can see is that growth, depending on the composition area or the complexity, in this case, ranges from 20% to 58%, 1.2 to 1.5 is growth from the initial estimate to what was actually delivered. We move to the next study, which is a 2013 study that was presented at ICEA, also some of my colleagues at Technomics. It was a different data set, a smaller data set. They had a broader scope. They were not only looking at size, but looking at growth and effort, productivity, schedule. The results here, interestingly enough, like I said, it's a different data set, was 19 to 61% growth. And then finally, a third study, a 2015 study conducted by a group of Navy cost analysts. This is a picture from that study, which I thought was interesting. We typically think of this cone of uncertainty as time goes on, we believe we've got better definition, we've got more certainty in terms of understanding what we're estimating, but they ask the question, in the case of software, is there actually an opposite cone of uncertainty? Unlike the other two studies, this study was not looking at software sizing data at the program level, at the total system level, but was looking at software data at the CSCI level. I looked at 200 different CSCIs across a broad range of systems, across a broad range of development processes. And interestingly enough, in this case, you know, the mean growth factors were from 29 to 67%. So, as you can see in first of all, you can see across those three studies, you know, you're looking at something in the 20 to 60% range. All right, so there's pretty good consistency across these three DoD related studies. So in closing, I think that, you know, like I said, size is an objective measure that is essential to credible defensible cost estimates, having that information, all right? Regardless of the sizing technique that's employed by those responsible for defining the program, the most credible sizing estimates are based on actual sizing data for completed or nearly completed project, which goes back to my point about dig for information. And thirdly here, regardless of sizing technique employed and the best intentions of all of the parties responsible for delivering that product, from project manager to software engineers, size is an unfortunate fact of life. I mean, the three studies I showed, which are not the only studies that are out there, indicate something in the 20 to 60% range. So you can imagine you've got that size in it, you've got that growth in size, and size is a key driver of cost. You're going to see commensurate increase in the cost estimates. So I'll leave you on the you know, the bumper sticker here that you know, beware of these hallucinated assumptions that are in the Dilbert cartoon, and also beware of experts who come to the table but don't come to the table with data in hand. So I will leave you on that note, and I regret that the sound has gone in and out for you. And Eric, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Rick. It was, I think it was going better later on, so let's not worry about that. I think it's an interesting presentation, so thanks for that. There is a question in the chat. One of the questions is you're using slogs, and I know you have a lot of experience in that. And one of the questions, if you start a program, how do you deal with slogs, the single lines of code at that moment? Because there's no programming yet, so you have to make an estimate. How do you take care of that?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you one example, and we often end up having to tell the program advocates this when we see their initial sizing estimate. Let's say you're developing a new radar system, right? Mm-hmm. The fact is, if you've got data for other radars that have been built, all right, have been developed, and you have what the delivered size of those programs were, that becomes an approach. You can use an analogy approach, you know, either pick the radar that's closest and make some informed judgments as to how you might adjust the sizing based on the capability difference between the new radar and the radar that's already been developed. I mean, that is the simplest approach here. And again, if you're starting with, it's better to start with something real and try to apply some informed judgment to it. In 9 times out of 10, the person you're presenting to will feel a lot more comfortable if you said, I had this data for this system, this data for this system, this data for this system, and I know my new system is going to has more capability, and here's my best estimate of how that would change the sizing, right? And I also knew that here were the development techniques that were used on that previous system, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be going agile, and we believe it'll make this difference.
Okay. Okay, good, thanks. One other question, Rick, what is here is in your opinion, how relevant today are cost drivers and scale factors that are identified in COCOMO 2 That's a question of Simon Wright. And it mentioned that the COCOMO 2 parameters are actually derived from slogs. And if it is something that you apply COCOMO 2, but any opinion from your side on that?
I'm afraid I can't. You know, it's been a long time since I've used COCOMO, so I can't answer that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another question. I don't know what your experience is in that area, but there's a question from Thomas Vellman who's asking, okay, how do you estimate if there's no code? I don't know if that's happening in your company. Have we moved to, for example, into artificial intelligence, deep learning instead of programming? Do you have any opinion on that?
No, I don't. And I think I think because of kind of our client base, which is principally, 99% government and heavily defense, we've not encountered any of that yet. So,
okay.
But I would certainly, I think there are probably other people that are speaking today who, Dan Gower probably has something to add there. So I would ask Dan that question.
Yeah. We can keep the question open. So
okay,
good. I stopped the share. I have one last question, but then Rob can start taking over the share of the presentation. Now, my question is mainly, Rick, you have a long experience in the role of cost estimator, and also that cost estimators was an explicit role. Can you tell us very short, in about a minute that we have left, when that started, when that became important? Because what we see in software in general, in software companies, that is still not an important role, but while in the defense market in the US, it's an important role for many years. When did this start?
I think the birth of cost estimating in the government, in DoD, was back in the 70s, and quite honestly, there's a far greater demand than there is supply for people who know how to do this work in the U.S. government market. So yeah, it goes back to the 70s. I think there have been up and down, peaks and valleys in terms of the health of this community, but from my perspective, for 40 years, whether budgets are going up or budgets are going down, I've always seen, I've had, my organizations, be it government or private sector, have had more work than they can handle, because in either of those cases. So hopefully that answers the question. And there's been a lot, and there's been a lot of advancement over the years. The key advancement has been in the government, particularly DoD, putting in place systematic data collection on their contracts as a term and condition in a contract. Defense contractors have to deliver data that is in a format for cost estimators.
I think this makes an important difference. So that thanks a lot, Rick, for your answers and for your great presentation.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, and I know you have to go to work on your proposal, but thanks for your attendance. Hopefully you can still listen in the conference. Then we will continue our program. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we go.